Hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about the law of attraction, the art of allowing, spiritual magic, the mind-body-spirit connection, and how to best enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. My name is Collin. I'm located in beautiful, sunny North Hollywood, California.
My name is Stephanie Orlina. I am a transformational life coach, and I'm in San Diego, California.
Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode today. We just want to let you know right at the top here, we often mention Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks. If you are not familiar with those names, Esther is a speaker and author who channels a thing called Abraham. Abraham is described as a group of entities from beyond our physical world who share their wisdom by speaking through Esther at workshops and speaking opportunities around the world. You can Google Abraham Hicks or search on YouTube if you want to know more about them. You can also learn more about them online at abraham-hicks.com. Each week we start our conversation with a different jumping off point. This week, the jumping off point is based on something I heard this week. I was watching something on YouTube because I watch way too many YouTube videos. And I heard someone say they kind of sort of criticize like everyone who talks about how we should understand the law of attraction, how we should practice the art of allowing, that sort of stuff, because they're saying, well, that philosophy is actually kind of mean to people because it's saying that anything bad that happens to you is your fault and you should feel bad about it because you're the one that attracted it in the first place. So if you're in an abusive relationship, you attracted that abuse and that's your fault. It's not the fault of the person abusing you. If you were in a car accident where you were driving safely and somebody, ran a red light and ran into you, that's your fault because it's the law of attraction. You attracted that. And so basically this person was kind of upset about that and said, you shouldn't believe in this stuff because it's really just a way for the people who talk about it to have control over the people that are listening to it or whatever and try to make them feel bad about themselves and whatever. So I thought we should talk about that.
Well, I mean, just the way you explained it from what they were saying, it sounds really harsh. So I thought that's funny how they're saying that, yeah, I felt like they were doing what they were saying, complaining about what the law of attraction people do. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I mean, I get where they're coming from. I think, Joe Vitale in the film The Secret actually says, I'm going to get a little in your face here and say, yeah, you did attract the car accident. I think it's a little bit of a misunderstanding of the overall philosophy. I've also heard people say, most people that I know that listen to Abraham Hicks say wonderful things. They say, oh, I love Abraham. She's really helped me. But I have heard one person say, I don't like how I've listened to a lot of their workshops on YouTube, and I don't like how Abraham attacks the people who are sitting in the hot seat. And I was like, attacks? Interesting. That's not how I ever hear it, but I understand sometimes Abraham can be kind of confrontational, I guess, when people bring stuff up. Yeah, sorry, you wanted to.
That's what remember when I was telling you, I feel like, so Abraham is a collective energies. And I really feel like that one, because I know what that person's talking about. Sometimes Abraham can be a little in your face. And I think that is a collection of one energies. And then there's the playful collective energies that they're kind of light and fun. And then, so I feel like there's these different combination of energies when Esther is channeling. And that is what I'm noticing after listening to them for, a decade. No, not that long.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's an underlying issue for me, and this is just something I have personal experience with. Like, I was raised, and a lot of the adults in my early life criticized themselves heavily, criticized others heavily, and criticized me heavily. That was just kind of part of how they were with me. And then I definitely came into teenage years and early adulthood being very critical internally of myself and judgmental of others. and very negative. And I don't think that was my true nature now, looking back, but I think that is what I was taught. And it's like when you're a little kid, you're very impressionable and you sort of learn to mimic what you see and what people do around you. It doesn't mean you do exactly what they do, but it's like if everybody in your life is kind of doing a thing, you get the idea as a kid of like, oh, this is how I should be. This is how I should sort of do things.
Yeah, creature of
Um,
habit.
yeah. So, I mean, I came into my teenage years and early adulthood being very critical of myself internally, like when my thought life would be like, very self-critical,
Mhm.
and any sort of like anything I perceived as a failure or not a huge success, I would be very hard on myself, and I still struggle with that sometimes these days, much
Sure.
less now, much
Yeah.
less now than back then. So I can understand like if somebody like had that sort of situation going on like I did, and then they learn just sort of like one aspect of the law of attraction, which is that it's just a law of the universe. It's not a judge. It's not a person like
Mhm.
saying, "Oh, I like you. I'm gonna let you
Right.
attract good stuff," and I
Or
don't like
you
this
did this a
person.
long time ago and therefore
Yeah,
you can't have this, or
yeah.
you can't receive
It's
this,
it's
or
it's basically, I think that is where the metaphor of the law of gravity does work, which
Mhm.
is like if you jump off a tall building, you're gonna fall to the ground. It doesn't mean that you're good or bad. It's like anybody who jumps off a building is gonna fall.
Or
Um,
two magnets, right? Like
right.
magnets, they
Yes.
attract. And so that's really
Yeah. So I mean, the example, talking about car accidents specifically, like I very much recall like when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was very surprised and intimidated by the way people drove here. And I would think to myself, which I think was, a thought that was born out of how I used to think as a kid and as a teenager. It's just something I hadn't sort of cleaned up yet in my mind, my thoughts, beliefs, things like that. But I remember thinking, like, God, it's so dangerous around here. One day I'm going to get in a car accident. I used to think that. I remember thinking that like almost every day when I got home from my
yeah,
job at that time.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
a year later, I got in a car accident. And
yeah,
for
yeah.
me, knowing the law of attraction, knowing how it works, instead of it being, um, oh, I'm such a idiot, I should have known better. It was my fault I attracted the accident. For me, it was more like just sort of being amused at myself and going, oh, like that
Dang.
that trigger, that I was experiencing every day, being sort of freaked out. Instead of trying to do something different with that, I wrote it. Like every day
Yeah,
I just got
yeah.
more angry and more scared. And yeah, I was putting out this vibration of like, oh, I'm getting in an accident. I just know I'm going to get in an accident someday. I'm going to get in an accident. And then
And
like
isn't
to me,
that
it made
great?
sense that I then got in an accident. you know?
And isn't that great? Because then
Yeah,
we can do that exact same thing
yeah,
with something we want.
yeah,
And just because you said a year later, it could have
yeah.
been 3 months later or 6 months, or,
Correct. Yeah,
5 years, whatever. But I think that that's a great example of using um, what we say and think over and over again,
yeah,
and just knowing like it's going to happen because law of attraction is responding to what I'm saying and thinking for our own good,
yeah.
not that particular thing. Kind of reminds me, I just want to say something really quickly because it's been in my head when you brought up the subject. Is I remember there's a workshop where Abraham was saying, yeah, Esther's gotten to the point where she says, oh, look, I did that thing I don't like so much. Oh, look, I did that thing I do like. Oh, look, and really owning that she created that.
Yeah,
Even the stuff that she doesn't like, she acknowledges that the power, like you were saying, I'm afraid I'm gonna get in an accident one day, like
yeah,
owning that power of what I think and what I say and how I feel. Like eventually that will happen if I keep it up. And this is such a smaller thing, but dang, it sure annoyed me when it happened. So yesterday I had an appointment at 2 and I left early in the morning, and I had this white top on, and I was at lunch, an hour before my appointment. And I remember thinking, oh, Steph, be careful. You're going to get something on your top. Like, just be really careful. And I'm almost wrapping up my meal. I look down, I don't have anything on my top, and I'm like, it was funny because I was like, there's like 2 bites left or something. And I'm like, I could feel that like I'm full, like I'm done, like I'm good.
Mhm.
But I'm like, no, I want that last one or two bites. And I went and put some red sauce on it, some more. And
Mhm.
I go to take a bite and I look down and I have this huge red spot on my top. And I'm like, no.
But there's a couple of things, and this is where I think, on the one hand, there are times where I think, the law of attraction is really simple and it's really easy to understand. But then, and I think at its core that's true. But then, like, how it gets translated through how we've been raised to think about life, like getting back to that simplicity sometimes can be complicated. So one thing I want to mention is, like, going back to the car accident example, the law of attraction doesn't, again, it's just a law of the universe. It doesn't absolve anyone from any responsibility. So, like, in that original car accident, telling it real facts of what actually happened. The gentleman that hit me, because he ran a red light, and I was turning left at an intersection, and he ran a red light on his side and just plowed into the passenger side of my car, like T-boned me, as it's
Ouch.
called. And he when he got out of the car, first I should say he helped me get out of my car, because my car, the doors were damaged, so he actually did something nice by helping me get out of my car. But then I think he was trying to help me. He wanted to convince me not to sue him. But bizarrely, he told me what happened from his side, which was he was an Uber driver, and he didn't have a ride going, and he didn't have a ride that he had agreed to. He was waiting to pick one up. And so, as he was, which is something that I would assume Uber completely discourages, which is he was driving, and he had his phone down on the passenger seat of his car, and he was looking at his phone to see if anybody was going to pick him up as a driver and ask for a ride. And so he wasn't looking at the traffic light. So not a smart move from my perspective, because he just basically admitted, like, I did something that's illegal, and I
Yeah.
should be held accountable. But the thing
Mhm.
is, the law of attraction doesn't say, oh, that accident was Colin's fault and that guy had no responsibility. Like, that's not what the
No,
law of attraction
no, we're
says.
not
That
gonna.
guy is
Yeah,
responsible for his actions. If he's telling the truth,
absolutely.
he should not have been looking at his phone. He should have been looking up above. He should have stopped the red light. So I think that's where people can get confused. It's not about, like, just absolving abusers or people who break the law or anything
Not
like
at
that.
all.
It's just about understanding that there's a narrative that you don't have any influence over that situation, and that is not true. You can change your vibration and have less of what you don't want in your life and more of what you do want. It's the other thing I want to say about it is, it's not, I was thinking about this week too. Is, like, I do wish, like, I think most people think, like, if they're aware of it, it's like, it would be great if I had, like, some sort of real mechanical device that I could hook you up to, Stephanie, and I could test your vibration right now. And I could get a reading and say, you're going to attract this much money in the next week, and you're going to attract this much friendship and love. And, you know, and if you're a little low, you could go, oh, okay, well, I need to raise my vibration this afternoon by 6 points, and, like, and you knew exactly what you could do to raise your vibration 6 points. But it's we don't have anything like that yet. Maybe sometime in the future we'll have that. But generally speaking, the guidance system, as Abraham talks about, we do have an internal guidance system. So we do have a kind of a meter, and the meter is, how do you feel?
It's not kind of a meter, it
Well,
is
it's
the meter, and it's the
right,
one that we pay. Most of us don't even acknowledge. We don't even know that it is a
right,
meter. We
right.
don't even know the true essence of why we have emotions. Like, I didn't even know that, and I'm still learning that and getting that, because
Yeah,
for years I just thought my emotions were a response to something. Like, someone gives me a kiss and it's like, oh, they love me, or someone gives me a hug and that feels good. Oh, and there, it's true to some degrees, but it's about that connection with my higher self.
yeah,
And if I'm thinking a thought that's in alignment with that, I feel good. And when I'm thinking a
right,
thought that's out of alignment with my higher self, I'm going to feel negative emotion.
yeah,
And that's it. It's nothing more. It's the relationship between me and me, which is me and my higher self, period.
right,
And we're not taught that. That's like why you and I are here, because a lot of the stuff we talk about here, I wasn't raised with. People around me didn't know it. Like some people just naturally, like that beautiful older woman I met in PB that day at breakfast, and she said, I was just happy and things always worked out for me.
Yeah.
And that just blew my mind because she knew that. And it was, I don't know that she was intentionally practicing, but she was just generally a happy person and things out, even like, I want to say there had to have been something good that came out of that accident. Is that the one where you ended up getting the car that you like?
Yeah, I've actually had two really bad accidents. Actually, I had one after that. In both cases, I got a better car
Yeah.
afterwards.
So I like to think like even yesterday when I spilled, luckily when I left the house, I brought another top just in case something happened to the one I was wearing yesterday morning. Um, and then also I always like to think like there's always something good that comes out of, something bad, like 9/11. I just remember it was our first time, Lou and I, in New York. And, usually, like I've said before, it's like we're so happy, we're in the vortex. But, we had never been to New York. And growing up, both of us had watched movies and shows where New York just looked rough and ragged. And, and in the 70s it was, right? In the 60s it was and stuff. It wasn't until, decades later that it became much nicer, cleaner place. But we were like on kind of like, and people weren't friendly, and we kind of held back. And then when after 9/11 happened, everybody was so nice.
Yeah.
People like this man we'd never met before helped us. This hotel gouged us, and he's like, that's ridiculous. And he went back, he took us over, we met him at the diner, and he took us over and got our money back, and we ended up staying somewhere else. Like people were talking to each other. I just got chills up my legs. Everybody was so friendly and nice and just wanted to help each other. I'm going to cry. And so there was a lot of horrific things and everything that happened that day, but there was so much good. People came together, they bonded in ways and connected with their fellows like they never had before. And you got
Again,
two cars out of that.
I think it's important to say, like, that doesn't mean that terrorism is great and the people that flew
And
the
not at
planes into the
all.
towers.
I'm not
I
saying
think
that
that's
at
where
all.
people misinterpret, and I get it, but it's like we're not saying that murder is good, or you got to look on the bright side of mass murder or anything like that.
We're
Like what
not
we're
saying
saying is
that
that
at all.
anything in your life that happens, there's you have a choice, which is, and sometimes it's hard, but you have a choice as to how you're going to process and behave, in the wake of that. And that's not to say, like, like when somebody loses a loved one, I'm we used to talk about this all the time, but every now and then it does get mentioned. I'm a medium. I've talked to, whether you believe that or not, it's fine, but I know it to be true, and I've talked to people that are on the other side that have transitioned, and I know that it's fine over there. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. It's fine. But like when somebody who doesn't believe in that sort of stuff comes up to me and they just share with me that a loved one very close to me, just passed away suddenly 2 days ago, I don't look at them and go, well, if you're sad, that's your fault. You should just feel great about it because they're celebrating on the other side. Like
Right.
everybody's going to have their own reaction to
Yeah,
things like that,
absolutely.
and that's totally fine. Like that's totally fine. All we're saying is that the law of attraction doesn't really change. It does just react to like how your
Yeah.
vibration is.
Yeah,
So
it's
if
just
you,
responding to us
yeah. So
at
if
all
you,
times.
and the other thing I wanted to point out too is like the story of you spilling the sauce on your shirt. Now, the thing is, it's possible to have that before it happened. It's possible to have that thought and say, oh, this, I am wearing all white. I have this like very stain worthy sauce in my hand or whatever. Um, I'm going to be careful and my shirt is going to stay clean. And if that's actually your vibration, you will be
Absolutely.
careful
Yeah,
and your shirt will stay clean. What really
totally.
happened when you had that thought was you had a fear based thought of like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be terrible if I get sauce on this shirt.
My vibration was more of, I'm gonna get something on this top and
Yeah,
before I get to my appointment. That was
yeah,
really my vibration.
yeah,
And that happened. So and it was okay, because you know
yeah.
what? I tried a jillion things last night. I soaked it for a really long time, and everything that should have gotten it out never did. And then I was like, bleach. We didn't have any bleach.
Yeah.
And then Laura was heading out, and I texted her. I said, "Hey, if you happen to go by the grocery store or the drugstore, if you see a small bottle of bleach, if you'd get me some." And she came home with a bottle, and I threw a bunch of bleach in there, and my top is like it was before I got the sauce on it. So,
Well, and I should say too, so the second accident I had was I think in 2017. Um, and that one threw me because I thought I had cleaned up my vibration about it. I thought because of the first one that had happened
yeah,
a few years earlier, I was like,
yeah,
huh, that's interesting because I don't
yeah,
drive around all day now thinking,
right.
oh gosh. Um, but you know, there was something really great that came out of that too. It would probably take me too long to explain it, but I had a
I
person.
thought there was with one of them
Well,
that
both
you,
of them had. I mean, the first one was like, stop thinking I'm going to get in an accident all day.
but people, like I felt like the second,
This, yeah,
there
the
was one
second
where
time,
people came together, and it was just something like that.
yeah, the second time was really. I mean, the biggest gift for me at the time was I had. I didn't. I'm just trying to figure out how to explain this and have it make sense. But like when I was growing up as a kid, I thought of myself as a victim a lot. Um, you know, my family members viewed themselves as victims. They viewed our family as victims sometimes, and they would just talk about us that way. So I had a lot of stuff about a victim mentality. That doesn't mean, again, I'm not saying like I don't want my words to be misinterpreted. Like if somebody robs you, you are a victim of that crime. I'm not saying there are no victims. You know, like that's a thing that happens. But there's a difference between that real situation and viewing the world as like, oh, bad stuff always happens to me. Why does it always happen
Yeah,
to me? People should
yeah.
be nicer to me. That's what I'm talking about, a victim mentality. And I had that sometimes. And the second accident that happened, it was interesting. I had a girlfriend at the time that I had just started dating, and I was on my way to her house to pick her up for a date, and it was like our fourth date or something like that. And things had been going really well, and I was really excited about it. So when the accident happened, it was like, ah, fuck, like this is awkward. Like it's not good in general. Like my car's totaled, you know, the cops are here, you know, all this. But also, like I was on my way to my girlfriend's place. This changes our evening quite a bit. But I called her and she showed up because I was only like a mile from her apartment. And I remember realizing that years earlier, as a younger adult, I would have felt like a real victim in that situation, meaning I would have felt helpless. I would have felt like I don't know what to do. You know, like this shouldn't have happened. All this kind of stuff, and I would have felt like I needed another person in my life to like come save me from that situation.
Mhm.
And when my girlfriend showed up, I mean, she was great. I mean, she was terribly concerned. She's like, "Is there anything I could do for you? How do you feel? Are you sore or anything like that?" Um, but what I realized was I didn't feel like I had that victim mentality. I understood that
Mm,
I had been a victim of a car accident.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that was a fact. But I felt like a mature adult that was like, even if I didn't have a girlfriend or she wasn't able to show up, I would have been okay and able to talk to the police and talk to the other drivers and everything and
Mm,
been okay. And
yeah.
for me, that was a just a way of understanding that I had grown up a bit as an adult and like,
Mm,
oh, you know,
nice.
I'm in a more
Yeah,
mature,
yeah.
stable place in my life and I don't need, you know,
Yeah.
even that first car accident was very different. I felt very sort of there was a victimization that I felt on top of the actual victimization, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. And I
yeah,
did feel in need of rescue,
yeah,
like emotionally, I guess I would say. And the
yeah,
second time, it was almost the exact same thing. A guy ran a red light. It was
yeah.
the other side of that car, the driver's side, which is a lot scarier, by the way, if they go on the driver's side. Um, yeah, so it was almost the exact same situation. And then afterwards, I felt like, oh wow, like I've grown up, I've matured. That's kind of
Mm,
cool to realize
wow.
that. And
Yeah, yeah.
um, So I mean, yeah, so that was a really good thing that came out of that. And I should say it was very strange because I needed some time to process it. I think I went to my girlfriend's apartment for about an hour, but we were going to go to see a band that I knew that I
Mhm.
really loved. Um, and it was much later. So we were going to go to dinner and have like a long dinner and then go to this show. We ended up eating while I was kind of mentally processing at her apartment.
Mhm.
And then at the end of it, I was like, you know what? I'm fine. I was like, you want to go to the show? And she's like, well,
Yeah.
I'm fine. Are you fine? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'm fine. And I went to
Oh
the
my
show
gosh, that's great. That
and
was probably the best thing you could have done too, to just kind of shift things around.
that's the thing. We danced our butts off at that
Oh,
show. We had a blast. I talked to my friends in the band afterwards, and like one of them had, I don't know if we told them or whatever, but one of them had heard about it, the accident, and some, like came over to me, and I all I was saying was like, "Oh man, this show was great. It was awesome."
yeah, yeah.
And they were like, "Were you just in a horrible car accident?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, but we're fine. Don't worry about that." And they're like, "Are you okay? like, should you be here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I wasn't hurt. Like nobody.
Yeah,
Thankfully, no one was injured, and whatever." But
that's cool because then that person's going to be able to tell a story someday of like, oh, and I had this friend who had gotten this really bad car accident, but I heard about it. And then I saw him like a few hours later and he was at this show of our mutual
well, I
friend
think
having dancing and
that's the
laughing and he
important
was said he
thing.
was fine.
That's the important thing there is like, and again, just talking about myself, how I grew up and how I was raised versus that moment. I wasn't denying reality. I
Right.
wasn't trying to just say, well, no, I was in a car
Yeah,
accident.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
it was nothing. It was nothing.
Ignore it, blow it
I,
off. Yeah.
I acknowledged it when it happened. Like I said, I took about an hour at my girlfriend's place, and like, if I needed the night to just chill, I would have taken it. But
Right.
after an hour, I was like, I'd like to go to the show.
Yeah.
And that's just I was able to, so I was acknowledging reality. I mean, I wasn't absolving the guy who hit me.
Well, and it was really about perspective, right? Like you took
Yeah,
care of yourself,
yeah,
and there you could have anyone could have had different experiences with that and they could have been
yeah,
angry all night long or
yeah,
really upset with themselves or the other person and just had a really different experience. It kind of reminds me of that movie with Gwyneth Paltrow where it's like, and this may be a little bit different, but you know, oh, okay,
Shakespeare in Love.
I have this thought and I feel this way and my life goes this way. Well, I have, you know, a negative response and I have a lot of anger and my life goes this way.
Yeah,
And the different paths that can take us
yeah.
to.
I'm glad you brought up Iron Man 2 because I love that movie. And I'm kidding. You brought it up before, and I've never seen it, but it's called Sideways or Side Route or something like that.
I don't know the name of it. I just
Yeah,
know two different outcomes and
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, great discussion. We hope you got something out of our discussion today. We thank you so much for listening or watching, whichever you did. We just want to remind you, as we do at the end of every episode, that we are posting a brand new episode every Monday morning for you right now. We truly appreciate you doing whatever your platform allows you to do to support the podcast. I do want to make a pitch. You do not have to do this. We are not obligating anyone to do it, but it would be a nice thing if you could do it, if you could take a few moments. If you're an audio listener only, if you could go on YouTube and just pull up this episode and just like it on YouTube, that would help us tremendously. It does seem to help the algorithms of the YouTube. We try not to worry about that, but it does sort of help us. So if you're an audio only listener and you'd be willing to do that for us, we would be super grateful to you. If you
Thank
don't have
you.
time or you don't go to YouTube at all, no problem. Don't worry about it. But anyway, so thank you so much again for listening and watching. Our social media links and our email address are in the description in the doodly doo down on the YouTube version. We wish you a happy and abundant week, and we look forward to you joining us again on the next episode of Co-Creation Station. Bye, everybody.
Bye.